Okay, so the movie starts with a picture of this elevator, and there's these light bars in the background. And this person comes out of the shadows, starts coughing, and he looks like he has a blue shirt on. There's crates beside him, and some cylinder crates. He has brown hair, and he starts to try to stand up. He shouts, "Hello, hello." Coughs some more, and then he gets scared because he doesn't know where he is. So there's these bars and this like gated fence kind of thing around him, and he's going up faster and faster, and he's yelling, "Help me!" And then he's about to hit the roof, and suddenly it stops. All the lights turn red. On one of the crates it says WCKD. He starts panting. The screen goes black, and the doors open. It's sunny out, and this person opens the doors, and everybody looks at him. They're all laughing at him. They all look very dirty, and there's about 20 of them on screen. One person jumps down, grabs him up, and throws him onto the ground. He says, "Day one, Greenie, rise and shine." Everybody's laughing at him. Everybody says he looks sloppy. And then he's like backing away from them. He gets up and just bolts. He starts running as fast as he can. They're all screaming, "We got a runner!" He's just running as fast as he can. And then he face plants. And then they all laugh at him. So good job on his behalf. Everybody says, "Nice." And then they're all like, "Whoops." And then he looks around, and there's these giant walls. And he looks around, and there's more giant walls on every side of him, with a couple trees. And the sky is white. He has a blue shirt. He's drenched in sweat. He actually has black hair and blue jeans. There's a bunch of rocks. And then the screen cuts, and it says The Maze Runner. Then the Maze Runner sign fades, and he gets thrown into this pit with this wooden door, but it's like not very much wooden, and it's just like a couple sticks, so I don't know why he just doesn't try to get out. And then one person comes, and his name, he's looking outside of the fence, and then one person comes. His name is Albie. He says, "Hi, welcome to the Glade." He calls him Green Bean, and we don't know why he calls him Green Bean. And then he says, "You're not going to run away again, right? Good." And then he helps him out, and he says that his name is Albie. And he has a tannish shirt, brown eyes. He says, "Can you tell me anything about yourself?" He says, "Anything at all." Our character can't remember anything. He can't remember his name. He can't remember anything. He still has his blue shirt on, but he's even more drenched in sweat. He says, "I can't remember anything." He says, "Tell me why." And the guy that helps him out, he comes and he grabs his arm, helps him out. He says, "You're going to get your name back in a day or two." And then he says, "It's natural." And he says, "It's the only thing they let us keep." Our main character says, "What is this place?" And Albie says, "Let me show you." So he reaches out for his hand, and our main character grabs his hand, and they go out, and they're looking at this whole place. There's a couple shots of this village. Albie says, "We eat here, we sleep here, we grow our own food." And then they're just talking about their experience in the village, and then whatever they need, the box that came up with our main character inside brings them all of their supplies that they need. And then everybody has their own job. And then they don't know. Thomas, our main character, asks why he's been sent up here. And then another person comes on the screen. His name is Newt. He shakes our character's hand. He says, "Hi, Greenie." We don't know who Greenie is, and he says, "I thought you had what it took to be a runner until you face planted." This character Newt has dark, like dirty blonde hair, like a whitish tannish shirt, and he's got a sword or a knife. Newt walks away. Our friend Albie takes him on a tour, and he shows him this giant treehouse thing. He says that he hopes that our main character is not afraid of heights. He tells him to come up. They go to the very top, and they're able to see the whole thing, the whole place. And he says, "This is all we got," and that they've built this whole place, and then if you respect it, then you'll get along just fine. And our main character asks, "What's out there?" And there's a shot of just a narrow line with a wall at the end. Albie says we only have 3 rules, totally avoiding our main character's question. He says, "First, do your part. No time for any freeloaders." Our main character looks and says yes. Then he says that you need to have trust in others, and most importantly, you can't go beyond those walls. And then he says, "Do you understand me, Greenie?" So I guess our main character's name is Greenie. A little boy shouts up the treehouse, "Hi, Albie." Albie says that this guy's name is Chuck, and that he's like the youngest person here. Cuts to a shot of Chuck and Thomas. Chuck's hanging these beds. Apparently he's hanging a bed for our main character Greenie. And Chuck's just talking about like all the times that's happened here, and that he peed his pants when they're trying to get him out of the pit. Thomas, our main character Greenie, walks up to the maze, and Chuck says he can't go in there. And then a bunch of stuff happens. He says he's just looking, yada yada yada. Then these two people come out of the maze, and they say, "Hi, Chuck, how you doing?" They say that he's been promoted, and then Chuck explains why they were able to go into the maze, but he's not allowed. And then Chuck's like, "What? There's no maze." And then it cuts to a shot of our main character Greenie looking in the maze. Chuck says he can't go in there. No one leaves, especially not now. Chuck's like, "It's not safe. Don't go in there. You will die." There's like some very tense music. Our main character Greenie still has his blue shirt on. He's glaring at the maze, and then the one guy who helped him out just comes and shoves him to the ground. And then our main character gets back up, and the guy who helped him out of the box is calling all the people, and then they're all like telling him not to go in there. And then Albie's there, and Newt is there, and then all the other people are there too. Chuck's there, and then they're all talking, and then they hear this like rumble and this roar. Then they all look into the maze, and the maze has like vines hanging from it, and then there's this sharp wind with a bunch of leaves flowing. There's a bunch of vines. It looks like kind of like poison ivy. You know poison ivy? Kind of looks like poison ivy on the walls of the maze. And then the walls start to rumble, and then the doors start to close. And our main character has no idea why any of this is going on. And then the doors start closing, and you get the last look of the soggy maze. And these walls are giant, like 200 feet. No, more than that. I don't know how to explain it. They all explain that he can't go into there. Albie says, "Welcome to the Glade." Still don't know what the Glade is. And then it's all a shot of them all walking away. Thomas is about like 5 feet away from the maze doors, and then it cuts to a shot of the middle of the night, and all these people in the place, I guess it's Glade, they start shouting Gladers and throw these like torches at this wooden thing. There's this breakdancer guy for some reason, and he just starts dancing. There's a whole bunch of drums. There's like 3 drum people, and then they all raise their glasses, and no idea what's in those glasses. And it's the middle of the night. The doors are still closed. The Newt sits beside Greenie and says, "Hell of a first day, Greenie." Newt has now. It looks like he has now it looks like he's a redhead, but he's still got dirty blonde hair. He offers Greenie a drink. Greenie drinks it, and it's horrible. He does not like it at all. Newt tricked him, and then he says he doesn't even know what it is. So, yeah. And then it cuts to a shot. Gally, who the person Gally's the person who helped Greenie out of the box, and he's just wrestling with another glider, and he's like, and then Newt is like, "Trust me, the maze is dangerous." Cuts to another shot of the closed doors, and then Thomas is like, our main character Greenie is like, "We're trapped here, aren't we?" And then Thomas is still looking at the maze door. Newt, still looking at the maze doors, says, "Yep, we are." And then he says, "You see those guys? Those are the runners." And then it cuts to a picture of 4 guys. 2 of them have blue shirts. One of them's light blue. One of them's dark blue. One of them has a white shirt. One of them has a black shirt. He said that they run the maze and they look for ways out. And then Thomas, our main character, is like, "How long have they been here?" Our Newt says 3 years, so that's a long time. And then Newt says, "Listen." And then there's just a rumbling noise in the distance. He says, "Hear that? That's the maze changing," in a very smug attitude. And then he says, "It changes every night, like it's normal." And our main character Greenie says, "How's that possible, that it's changing?" They've been sitting here for quite a while. I don't know why they're not standing. And then they say that the runners are the only ones who know more about it. They're the strongest and the fastest, so they go out there and not them. So Newt just kind of burned Greenie and himself. And so then they're just talking about the maze, yada yada yada, and then our main character Greenie says, "What happens to the people who go in there who aren't runners?" Then Newt explains that there's these things called grievers, and he says that nobody's ever seen one, but they know they're out there and that they kill you, apparently. So that's not good. And he's looking like upset. So then Newt looks upset, and then he just completely changes his attitude, and he's like, "Come on, you're the guest of honor." And then the match where Gally was fighting that other glider finishes, and Gally throws that guy to the ground, and he says, "We got Winston, and he's the keeper of whatever, and then we got 2 medjacks," and then he's like, "We got a bunch of other people," and so it's just like an interview for all these people. And Greenie says, "What if I want to be a runner?" And it's like, "You can't be a runner. You're not allowed to be a runner." And then in the background, Gally and this other person are fighting, and Gally bumps into the guy, and he's like, "Huh? What did you say, Greenie? You want to see what you're made of?" And then they all start shouting, "Greenie, Greenie!" And then Greenie accepts the fight, and he's like, "Sure." And then everybody's gathering around, and then they're gonna fight. So they're about to fight. Everybody's saying, "Come on, Greenie, yeah, you got this." So he goes up, he says, "Okay, the rules are simple, Greenie. I try to push you out of the circle. It's basically like a sumo." And he says, "Take it easy. 3, 2, 1, go." And then he immediately pushes him out, and then he pushes him to the ground. So this is not going very well for Greenie. But Gally's super smug about it. And then Greenie says, "What do you want?" And then Greenie says, "Why are you calling me Greenie? Stop calling me that." Then Gally calls him Shank instead, and then they all start shouting, "Shank, Shank, Shank!" And then Gally's like, he looks like a shank. Thomas tries, Greenie tries to run into him, and then Gally throws him to the ground. Gally is saying like, "Oh, you're so bad at this," and then Greenie runs at him, and he's about to get taken down, and then he flips over Gally, and Gally falls to the ground, and they're all like, "How did he do that?" And then he gets up, and then Greenie gets up, and then Gally like sweeps his foot, and then he falls to the ground, and he hits his head really hard on the sand. And then he says that he remembers his name, and he shouts, "Thomas." And then he says, "Thomas, hey, my name is Thomas." And then they all start shouting, "Yay, my name is Thomas." And then they all start shouting, "Yay, his name is Thomas." And then they're all like, "Yay, yay." And then they all say like, "Welcome home, Thomas. Welcome to the Glade." And so the Glade is this box that they're stuck in, surrounded by the maze. They're all like drinking this weird drink that Thomas doesn't like. And Gally says, "Good job, Thomas." And then they hear one of the grievers. And it cuts to another shot of the doors of the maze. And then a bunch of other stuff happens, and then he's like, "What? That's a griever, my friend." And then yada yada yada. "Don't worry, you're safe here with us." Yada yada yada. And then it goes, and he's sleeping, like in the hammock that Chuck hang for him. And it cuts to him sleeping, and he's not actually sleeping. He's just awake, and he's just staring like a psychopath at the ceiling in his hammock. And it cuts to this blue and green and the maze, and then a bunch of lights on the ceiling, and then it's like, "Wicked is good, Thomas, Thomas, Thomas." And then it's a bunch of these people, and it's like a montage, and they're like studying him, and they're like, "Can you hear me?" And then there's eyes, and there's people, and there's people banging on this water sill. And then he wakes up, and then Albie, Thomas is about to scream. Albie covers his mouth, and Albie says, "Come with me." So he gets out of his hammock, and he walks through the grass. They're about 2 feet apart from each other. Albie's in front. He says, "I know it's hard to believe, but it wasn't always this way." And then he's got a knife in his hand, and he says, "We lost a lot of boys to fear, to panic, because they were all super idiots." And so then it cuts to a shot with him and Albie, and they're like looking at the village place. And then Albie's like, "You're not like the others. You're curious. You want to be a runner. I like it." And then he says, "You're one of us now, so you need to know what that means." So he gives Thomas the knife, and he tells him to go carve your name on this wall by the door. And so what they do, it's like kind of a tradition. Everybody who is part of the Glade, they write their name on there, and then when they die, they have to cross out their name, or the other people cross out their name. So Thomas writes his name, and then Thomas asks, "How did all these people die?" And then Albie says like, "Dark days, a bunch of other stuff happened, blah blah blah." So Thomas writes his name, and then it cuts to him farming with Newt and a bunch of other people, and then he's like trying to ask ways that we could get out, and Newt's like, "Nope, that doesn't work." And then he's like, "Nope, that doesn't work." He's like, "Nope, that doesn't work." And then he's like, "Oh, well, what if you do this?" And then Newt's like, "No, we tried everything." So he's super mad at him, because he's like trying to think he's better than everybody else. And then he's like, "Whatever you think of, we've already tried it. We've tried everything. The only way out of here is through the maze. I don't know why they didn't just build a tall ladder." And then he says, "Here you go. Dig us up some more fertilizer." So then our friend Thomas goes to this forest, like a little bit farther away. And then he says, "Just get the fertilizer, Thomas," like he's mocking Newt. But Newt's like the best character, so I don't know why he's doing that. So he goes in the middle of the woods, and it's sunny. There's green trees everywhere. There's one slanted tree on screen, and there's like a little river. There's the sun shining through the trees. There's he's still wearing his blue shirt. Remember, you gotta remember that. And he sees this thing that they made for this person, and it says it says George, and there's like a skull with a bunch of spikes, and then there's a bunch of bones on the ground, so it looks like George didn't make it. And then there's this person behind him that he saw, and he says, "You!" And then Thomas is like, "Oh, Ben, right? How you doing, buddy?" And then he goes up to him, and Ben starts growling at him like a dog. And then he says, "Hey, are you okay, Ben?" And then Ben just freaks out, and apparently his body went weird or something. And then he says, "It's your fault. I saw you. You did this. I saw you." And then Ben's like trying to like hurt him, and then he's like grabbing his arm super tight. So Thomas like pushes him off of his body. Or no. Thomas whacks him with a skull that he found on the ground, and then he pushes him off his body, and then gets up. Ben is still trying to get this guy for some reason. I don't know why Ben hates Thomas so much. They're running through the forest. It's very lush. There's a lot of ivy, and then they fall down this hill together. And then Thomas shouts, "Hey!" And then everybody hears him, and they all run over to him. And he's like, "Help, help!" And then they run out of the forest, and Ben's still chasing him. They're all running towards Ben. Ben gets on top of him. Ben's like, "I'll kill you! I'll kill you all!" And then Newt smacks him with a giant pole. And then Thomas is like, "Are you okay?" And then Newt's like, "Are you okay, Thomas?" And then he's okay. And then they're all holding down Ben. And then Gally comes over, and he's like, lift up his shirt. And, Albie's like, lift up his shirt. And then it looks like he like, there's this weird, like, hole with a bunch of veins coming out of it. And Gally says he's been stung, so his body went weird. And he says, "In the middle of the day? That's not possible." And then they're like, help me, please, just help." And then they're like, "Put him in the pit," because he got stung, so they don't want him to kill anybody. So they put him in this pit thing that Thomas was in at the start, where Albie came. And then Thomas is like, "What the hell just happened?" So then they all walk back to their stations, and then Thomas asks Albie what happened to him. And then Albie says, "It's called the changing. It's where your body gets weird when somebody gets stung." And Chuck's in the background just listening. And then Albie's just explaining to him, like, your body goes weird and you can't talk clearly. And then he asks, what has he been saying? Like, what did he say to you? And he says that it's all his fault, and that he would kill him. And so yada yada yada, they talk about Ben, and then it cuts to the doors, and everybody's surrounding the doors, and there's a bunch of people. There's like 20 people that I can see with big wooden poles, and then this one person, Minho, is like throwing Ben out of the thing, and then they all lower their poles. Some of them got like these long ones that are for pushing, and then some of these people got these like spear ones. And so Ben's like crying. He's like, "Please don't put me out there." And then he starts like coughing blood, and then they're all like, "Staffs!" And then Minho throws this like bag into the maze, and then there's this giant growl and a bunch of wind, and then they start to push him out of the maze, and he's like, "Please, I don't want to go." And then he gets pushed out of the maze, and then the doors close, and then he's banished, and then he's like, and then Albie's like, what did Albie say? No, they just all have a moment of silence, and then Albie says he belongs to the maze now. And that means like 0 brain cells. And so he's like, he like walks away, and everybody's like walking away because they're super sad, and somebody's like, that's messed up. So then they all go, and then Gally's crossing off his name. Gally's crossing off Ben's name, and then Thomas is about to go to sleep, but before he goes to sleep, he closes his eyes, and he sees that like blue light again, and then he's like, it says like a bunch of things, and it's another montage, and then there's this girl, and there's this other girl that's like walking, and then there's this like blue screen, and then this the girl keeps saying, Thomas, Thomas, everything's going to change. And then there's a bunch of people in tubes. There's Albie in a tube. Thomas says, for some reason, Thomas says wicked is good, and then they're all like talking. The girl and Thomas hold hands, and then there's a bunch of blue lights and another montage. Then Thomas wakes up in the middle of the night. Everybody's still asleep. And then the maze is changing, so he can hear the rumbles. And then there's these Minho and another runner are going to run the maze. Oh, Minho and Abby are going to run the maze, and Newt saw them off. And as soon as the doors were opening, like, they gotta wake up really early, like 5 in the morning early. And then it cuts to this shot. Thomas is not doing any work. He's just sitting on a log while he watches other people do work. And Chuck's like whittling or something, because Chuck is super good at everything. And he's like, what does that mean? Like, Thomas is like talking to Newt, and he's like, what does it mean? And then he's like, oh right, like, it's like you've heard, every month the box sends up a new arrival. And Newt's like super smug about it. And then Thomas still has his blue shirt on. I don't know when they're gonna wash it, because it's still like wet. And then Thomas is still talking to him, just yada yada yada. Chuck has curly hair. I don't remember if he had curly hair at the start though. He's also the youngest person here. And then Newt's like talking to him like he doesn't like him, because he's super mad at him for some reason. And Chuck just looks at him, and he's like, uh-huh. And so they keep whacking this like stump thing that they're working on. Then Thomas grabs a machete, and then Thomas starts whacking the stump thing. And then Newt's like, yeah, good job. And then they're like, okay, that's good. And then there's what else important? Okay, so then there's a shot of them all waiting at the doors of the maze, and they're like, are they going to come back? There's not very much time left, because they have clocks or something, so they know when the doors are going to close. But they don't see them, so they're all worried that Minho and Albie are not going to come back. And then Thomas is like, we need to go out there and get them. And then Gally's like, no, we can't go out there, it's against the rules. Because Gally's the boss of everything for some reason. And so then there's more Griever howling, and the doors of the maze are starting to close. And then Thomas is like, there! And then out of the corner, Minho comes like out of the corner with Albie on his back, and he's like trying to rush in, and they're all cheering him on, and the doors are closing. And then he's like trying to drag him out, and he's doing all these different things to drag Albie, but none of it's working. So he's trying to drag him out, and the doors are closing. He's yelling. Everybody's like, ah! So then, because obviously he's gonna do it, Thomas runs out into the maze, and they like all try to like hold him back while the doors are closing. They're about to crush him, and then he runs out, and then the doors fully close. And then Minho's there, and he's like, congratulations, you just killed yourself. Because nobody survives a night in the maze. It's just rules. And then they're all like dragging Albie, and it's midnight, and it's very pretty. It's a very pretty maze. There's ivy everywhere, like on all the walls, and there's holes, and it's like metal but stone, like kind of a mix of concrete and metal. More like concrete though. And it's just very lush and nice, and it looks like a great place to live. So then they're like taking a break from moving around a lot, and then there's a griever coming, and then they're like, we need to get Albie up onto this ivy so that the griever doesn't see him. And then Minho just starts running away because the griever's about to eat them. And then because they're holding this vine together and Albie's like heavy, when Minho runs away, Thomas just dips, like he's holding on still, but like the rope is just too heavy, and he just falls into this tiny crack underneath the ivy that you couldn't see, and he's still wearing his blue shirt, and he's hiding there, and he sees the griever has these like robot legs, and so Minho like is gone. Minho just like is not to be seen. And then he sees these robot legs underneath the ivy, and the griever runs away. And then he helps Albie get down because Albie is unconscious. And then he's looking around, and he sees the griever. Like, or no, he doesn't see the griever, but the griever's above him, and it starts to drool, and it looks like a giant, like it has a fly head with like robot legs, and it looks like half biological on the top but half robot on the bottom where its legs are, and it looks like really creepy. Like this is how do I explain it? It's like a spider, but if the spider had robot legs, and instead of a bunch of small eyes, it had two big ones that looked like they had hexagons in them, and it had these like spiky things like on dinosaurs, like on its back. And so Thomas is running away. He's running as fast as he can. It looks like he can be a runner because he's going super fast. He's like 20 feet away from the griever, and then he runs into a dead end, and that like he runs into a dead end, so like there's no way out of there. But he starts to climb this ivy, which Newt said was impossible, and then the griever starts to climb. Then he makes like a 20-foot leap for some reason. It's like in the Planet of the Apes, and then the griever makes that leap as well. Then he's got to make another jump, and he makes it somehow, but it's like 30 feet this time, so don't know what's happening there. Then the griever falls down, and then Thomas runs, and he sees Minho at the end of this hall, and then the maze changes in the middle of the night. So this hall is closing, like the doors do on the maze. So the hall's closing, and so Thomas is waiting for some reason. He's not going through. Then he gets the griever's attention again. Then he runs through, and it's very close. It's so close. Like the griever is like a meter away from him, and then the screen cuts to dark, and then the maze like makes its rumbling sound, and there's Chuck at the door. He's like, "Hey guys, get up!" And then everybody comes over, and they're looking to see if they're still there, but they're obviously not going to be there because nobody survives the night in the maze. And so they're all like, "He didn't make it, Chuck." And then Chuck's like, "But they did." And then he's like, "I guess you're right." And then this one guy just kept looking for like 5 seconds longer than everybody else, and he's like, "Look, they're here." And then they like help him up, and they help Albie, and this doctor guy is like this doctor guy is like helping Albie because Albie's still unconscious. And then Chuck is like, "Did you see a griever?" And then Minho's like, "Thomas didn't just see one, he killed it." So Thomas killed a griever, which is not usually doesn't usually happen. And then it cuts to this scene, and they're like in like a what's it called, like the place where you do the judge things, and there's the judge, and they're like all deciding what the person's fate is. So they're in one of those that they built, and Galley's like, "The rules are changing. We can't just have people doing stuff like this." And then Newt's like, "I agree." we can't just have non-runners running into the maze whenever they feel like it. So then he's like, okay, so let's make him a runner. And then Gali's like, why would we make him a runner? And then Minho's like, well, he killed a thing, so we should make him a runner. So then Gali's like totally not in agreement with this, and then this person's like, hey guys, come outside. So they all go outside, and the box is coming back up, and it's like shouldn't be because it only comes up once every month. And so the doors open, and this time there's no crates or anything in it. There's just one person, and it's a girl, and it's the girl that was in Thomas's like dream thingies with the blue lights and stuff. And in her hand is this white thing, and they're all like, I think she's dead. And then Newt grabs the white thing. It's a piece of paper. He opens it, and it says she's the last one ever. So they're not getting another person. So he says that. Then the girl wakes up, says Thomas, then faints again. And so that's yes. And then they're all like doing a bunch of stuff, and then they're like looking at her in the hospital, and they're like, what happened to her? And then she's just lying down there because she's like sleeping or unconscious or something. Doesn't really say. And then Thomas says, do you recognize her? And then Thomas says, no, but she was in his dreams. So that's like kind of a lie, but maybe he didn't know that it was the same person. So yeah, then he's like talking to he's talking to Minho, and he's like, we need to go out there, and we need to go get and then we need to go back out to the maze. So Minho's like, well, all the other runners quit because it's scary. There was a graver for some reason, and so he's like, and then Thomas is like, well, I need more runners. And then Minho's like, okay, I'll grab a couple people. So he grabs like, I don't know how many people. He grabs like 4 other people. So it's him, Thomas, Winston, and a couple of like 3 other people. And then Thomas is like, let's go. So then they go out. Minho is still wearing his blue shirt and it looks like he's wearing like blackish pants. It looks like he's wearing blackish pants. Can't really see it very well because the lighting in this movie is not very good. And then they're running through this maze, and Minho takes them to this part of the maze, the doors, and they look, and there's the squished griever, and there's one of its legs, and there's like all of its organs and stuff. And then they're all like, what the hell? And then Minho just sticks his hand into it, and for like some reason he sticks his hand into it, and then the leg like moves a little bit, like it turns on a little bit, and they're like, it's a reflex, don't be scared. So then Minho pulls something out, and then they run back to their glade because it was about to be nighttime. So then they're all going, and they all go back to their glade, and they show everybody that they got this, and like they got this part of the griever, and then it's the like. And then it's like, it cuts to this lush forest. I really like the forest scenes. It's really nice. It has a bunch of trees, and it's a good break from the, like, stone walls. And it looks like, is that, oh, no, I thought Thomas had a sweater on, but it's just his shirt again. Minho still has his black pants on. Ooh, Minho has a brown belt. I never noticed that. And Minho takes Thomas to this place called the Runner's Hut, and Minho uncovers this blanket thing, and on all the walls, there on all the walls of this place, there's a bunch of like numbers and like pictures of the maze. Then Minho takes off this blanket thing, and then there's this whole diagram of the maze made of tiny pieces of wood, and then there's their like laid in the middle. And Minho says that they mapped the whole maze. Like there's not a single thing that they didn't map. And then he's like, "There's no way out. It's not even. There's no way out." And then he explains that the maze changes on a cycle, and so the maze, if the maze changes on a cycle, then it's like, then it goes like 7, 4, 3, 7, 2, 8, or whatever like that. Like, because there's 8 different parts of the maze, and on the thing that he pulled out of the griever, it had a 7, so it might have come from section 7, because section 7 was open that night. So then he just like tells him about it, and then Chuck comes into their hut and he's like, we like come look, and then Chuck's like, girls are awesome, and then he points at the treehouse, and the girls just throw in a bunch of like fruit and stuff, and he throws like a sardine on Gally's head, and then Thomas is like, stop, I'm Thomas, I'm gonna come up, okay? So he goes up, and then he's like, hey, how you doing? And then he looks, and she has a machete in her hand, and so he convinces her to give him the machete, and then he grabs the machete, and then he cuts the treehouse down, so then they all fall and crush Gally. Just kidding. So he grabs the machete and he puts it on the ground, and then he talks with the girl, and he's like, that your name will come back to you in a couple days, and then she's like, so he's like, your name will come back to you in a couple days, and then she says, my name's Teresa, what are you talking about? And so apparently Teresa like is the last one, and she says, what, the last one, what does that mean? And so they're just talking, and Thomas is just talking, and it's just boring, and he says, I saw you in a vision, and like it's like, what do you mean a vision? So then it's like the middle of the night, and they have all these lights on, and they're in this house, and she says that she had these 2 things in her pocket, and then Albie's on this like bed thing, and he's been stung. So this thing that she had in her pocket, it's like a cylinder, has this like blue liquid in it, and so Thomas convinces Newt to stab it into Albie, and he's like, how could it possibly make him worse? He's already gonna die. So they're about to stab it into him, Thomas is about to stab it into him to like give him this thing, and then he wakes up and he says, it's all your fault, and he like grabs him, and then they're all like holding him down. Then like Thomas is about to like be killed by Albie, and then Teresa grabs the antidote thing, and or like the like cylinder thing, and just stabs it into his arm, or no, she stabs it into like a foot away from his head, like by his armpit, and then he just stops attacking everybody. And then Newt explains that there needs to be at least one person with him at all times. And then Gally walks in and he's like, hey, what's up? And then he says, sundown, Greenie, time to go. And so they are going to... Wait, where are they going? I forget where they're going. Oh yeah, Greenie has to sleep in the pit for 2 nights because he ran out of the maze. Forgot to say that. So he's in the pit, and then Chuck comes and gives him food because he's not supposed to have food, but you need food because food is yummy. And then Chuck explains to him that he came into the maze with this thing in his hand, and it was a little statue, and it's all he has from his parents. It's a little statue of a man. And So he gives it to Thomas, and he's like, I want you to give this to them when you make it out. And then Thomas gives him the statue thing back, and he's like, I want you to give it to them because you're gonna get out of this maze with me. And he's like, thanks. So then Thomas has this like strap thing on, and like he has the strap thing on that Minho has on, and so the doors of the maze are opening. And then Minho's like, "You ready?" And then they start to run, and they're like, "Let's go!" So they're running, and then Minho knows this all by memory, and he's like, "Turn here, turn here, turn here," and then they get into this big place with a 7 on it, and that like this big open area with a 7 on it. Then they keep running, and then they get to this big place with a bunch of these like panel things, and Thomas is like, "What's this? Like, what's this place?" And Minho says that this is like they call it the Blades, and they look and they see these clothes, and it was the same red shirt that Ben was wearing. So Ben got all the way here, and then he died to a griever, and he knew all the way, how to get all the way here because he was a runner. So then they're all going through, and there's these like the ground is just stone tiles, and these blades are actually made of metal. There's a bunch of bushes everywhere, and then the thing that they had that they got from the griever starts beeping, and then a certain way that they point it starts beeping more and more. So as it's beeping more and more, they go that direction, and then they see this place that Minho's never seen before, even though he thought he mapped out the same thing, the whole thing. And so they go inside, and it's like this very narrow hallway, and at the end, it's like this just wall, and he puts the beeping thing very close to the wall, and it opens this door, and then there's a bunch of holes, and they can hear grievers inside of the holes, so they're like, oh, this must be where the grievers go at nighttime. I mean, at daytime. And then this thing, then this like laser coming out of the hole just scans them, and then they're like, what was that? And then, so they're like, what was that? And then they're like, we need to get out of here. And then all the walls start rumbling, and then they're like, give me. And then Minho's like, give me the key. So they start running, and the door where the scan came from closes, and they keep running, and they're running as fast as they can because they triggered something. And the blades start moving, and he's like, we gotta go fast. So they're like, bida boo, 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 bida boo. So they're going super fast, and they get back, and they say, we found this place that we've never seen before. And then the galley's like, you're not going back out there. And then Teresa's there, and she's like watching Gally and him fight, and then she's like, hey, stop it. And then she's like, it's Albie, he's awake. So then Albie's awake, and she says he said nothing, and he looks super normal. He doesn't have a shirt on, but he still got his pants on, and he doesn't have those veins anymore. And all he says is, and then he's like just looking at the floor, and Thomas says, hey Albie, how you doing? And then he says, Albie, we might have just found a way out of the maze. And then Albie starts crying, just tearing up. And then Albie's like, we can't. And then Albie's like, we can't leave. And then Thomas is like, this is complete nonsense. And then Albie's like, they won't let us leave. And then Albie's like, I remember. And then Thomas is like, what? You remember what? And then Albie's like, you sent us here. And then he says, you were always your favorite, Thomas. Always. And then there's people shouting outside. And apparently the maze, the doors aren't closing. And then a bunch of grievers start to come out of the maze. And so they run through a cornfield, which is not a good idea. because like in every movie when somebody runs into the cornfield, like be it Jurassic Park or something, everybody always dies. So they're all in the cornfield, and one person gets swallowed. So then uh, like Gally and Newt are like in the box because it's not going down, and then Thomas and Minho and Albie and Teresa, they're all in the cornfield, and then they run out and they're starting to run to the to the like this shelter that Chuck had started boarding up, and so Teresa throws this like fire bomb at it. It's like a bottle, but it's on fire. So she throws it at him, and then it starts to burn up in flames, and it worked really well. I don't know why they didn't try that before. And then this one guy that was in the back of the people of everybody who is running, he's like, no, please don't eat me. But then he gets eaten anyway because he's not a main character. And then everybody's in the shack place, and and then a griever jumps on top of it, and it's just made of like twigs and sticks. So I don't know what they expected from it. And so the griever pokes a hole, and the griever grabs Chuck, and then Albie just goes like super mode and just starts smacking it with this like machete, and then Chuck's like, I'm fine, like I'm good, and then he grabs this thing that the griever's trying to smack into, poke into him, and then Albie like gets grabbed by the griever, and Thomas is trying to help him, and then Albie says, Thomas, get them out, and then the griever grabs Albie, and now Albie's dead. So that's not very good because Albie was like a good person, and then they're like, and then they're all like, why did you do this? And then Gally's like trying to attack Thomas, and then Thomas grabs the thing that the griever tried to poke into Chuck, and he stabs it into himself, and it makes his body go weird because like their body goes weird sometimes. It's like normal for them. And then he has the same vision that he did, but it's like pictures of Chuck, and there's like monitoring systems, and then there's a bunch of other people, and they're like watching, and then there's a picture of Gally, and then a picture of Teresa again, then a picture of Thomas, and then a picture of Teresa, and like Minho, and like they're studying them or whatever, and he says, and then this girl says Wicked is good, and then Teresa said Wicked isn't good, and then it's like a montage of every person in the maze going into these tubes, and then Thomas is talking to Teresa. He's like, can't let them die. And then Thomas wakes up. They use the second antidote on him, and then Teresa's like, you good? And then he's like, I remember. And then Chuck and Minho and Newt are also there, and Chuck is like, what the hell were you thinking? And then they're all like, Gally's taking control, he doesn't really like you. And then Newt gives an inspirational speech to what's his name, Thomas. And then they all they all make a plan to get out of the maze once and for all. So Teresa and Thomas are about to be sacrificed like Ben was, because they made this whole thing happen apparently. And they're like, please don't put us into the maze. And Gal's like, I'm not going to put you back into the maze. You're really good at like surviving in that maze. So then he hangs them on this pole, and he offers a sacrifice to the grievers on the pole. And then out of nowhere, the people who are tying them there, Teresa kicks one of them, and then takes her hands loose, and then grabs the spear, and then like Minho and Newt and Chuck and Teresa and Thomas, they all got like spears, and Teresa got another machete. And then they're all like, if you want to survive, then come with me, but if you want to stay in the glade, you can stay in the glade with Gally and live your lives here forever and ever. And so then it's like a montage of them all running through the maze, and them all running to the like place with the long bridge that scanned Minho and Thomas earlier. And then a Griever comes out of there and starts trying to attack them, and it kills a couple people. And then Chuck has the tracker thing for some reason. Like, I don't know why they'd give it to Chuck. And then he like almost drops it, and then he grabs it again, and then Teresa helps him up. And then they go to this thing, and they put the key against it again, and it like makes a red circle, and there's a bunch of numbers. There's 8 numbers, and then they're like, we don't know the passcode, and then Thomas is like, well, how many numbers are there? And then they're like 8, and then Thomas is like, Minho, what's the order that the maze switches? And the whole time Thomas has been wearing this blue shirt, like that. No, he hasn't taken a shower in ages. He must stink. And so then they open the door, and the Griever gets pushed off the edge, and then there's just a long hallway with lights on the roof that was in Thomas's dream. So then they're in this hallway, and they walk down the hallway, and then they open this door that has like blood on the handle, and they see this thing, and there's another hallway, but it's like shorter, and there's a bunch of lights on the ceiling, and a bunch of like smoke, and then there's this dead scientist with like blood on the wall, and there's a bunch of scientists everywhere. There's broken glass on the floor, a bunch of stuff. Then Thomas presses this big red button and starts playing a video clip of the girl that isn't Teresa, that was also in Thomas's like flashback, like no, not as like flashback, but his like vision. And then she's just talking like super normal, and then she's like, oh yeah, so the sun got too close to the earth, and then it like burned everybody, and then everybody who didn't get burned died from this thing, like this virus that like made them into like zombie things, but they call them cranks because they don't use the word zombie for some reason. And so she's just explaining all of this, and then in the background these SWAT people are just coming in, and they're shooting like all the scientists. And then she grabs a gun and puts it to her head and said, remember, wicked is good. And then she shoots herself, and then they're all like, what just happened? And then they see this door, and it's like beginning to open, and then they're like, we're gonna make it out, hooray. And then there's Gally right behind them, and he's been stung, so his body is about to go weird, and he remembers Thomas, and he has a gun from one of the scientists, and he's about to shoot Thomas, but Chuck jumps in front and shoots, and Chuck jumps in front and takes the bullet, and then Minho chucks a spear through Gally's chest, so Gally and Chuck are both on the ground. Chuck dies. Chuck gives Thomas his statue thing, and then these SWAT people, they come back, and they're like dragging Thomas off of Chuck's body, and then they're dragging him to this helicopter through this desert, and then everybody gets this like last final look at the maze, and they see it from the outside, and it's Humongo Mongiato, and then all the dead scientists and the dead lady that was on the ground that said wicked is good is like in this board meeting, and she's like, well, I think part 1 was very good, but they don't know any of this. And then it's the last scene, and the helicopter's flying through this like desert, because almost everywhere is a desert now, and there's like the destroyed buildings, and then it fades to black, and then it says the Maze Runner. So that's the end of movie 1. There's 2 more movies. I don't know. I'd give it like maybe a 5 out of 10, maybe like 5.5 out of 10. It was an okay movie. So yeah.